GDLS Canada, an industry leader dedicated to supporting our customers and the community.
Carol Montreux Morlock Patterson had no nickname. We didn't really have nicknames back then. I don't think that's much more popular now. I'm 77. My birthday is March 20th, 1944, and I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. I went to Western Maryland College, which is in Western Maryland. It's now known as McDaniel College. When I graduated from there with a degree in health and physical education, I started teaching in Baltimore County. That's where I met my husband. He was also teaching in Baltimore County. I was sent to, I think there were about 15 high schools there, and they had just started lacrosse in the high schools, and I was sent to one of the schools that had girls lacrosse because I had some background in it, and started coaching there, and it just so happened my husband was the men's coach there. And so that's how we met, and that's how we started. The joke of it, his joke was that the reason that I got him is that I constantly asked him for advice on coaching goaltenders. I'm not so sure that's true, but anyway, that's how we met, and that's where I first started teaching. He left teaching and moved back to Western New York, to the Tuskewe Indian Reservation. We were married, and I moved with him. So I moved to Western New York in about 1970, 1971, we moved back. And then I started teaching at the local school, Lewiston Porter. There was no lacrosse in Western New York. There was extremely limited activities for women or for girls in Western New York. Considering that I'd come from Maryland, where my programs growing up were extensive for girls in sports, it bothered me greatly, and so I immediately started getting into starting different activities. I was fortunate at Lewiston Porter that my principal was from the Naval Academy and had played lacrosse. And so when I was doing my master's degree at the University of Buffalo, my thesis was on lacrosse and skill testing. And so he provided all the funds I needed in order to get the equipment and to do the program there. So I started it there through the master's program. Then there was a couple people in Buffalo, a lady by the name of Tatty Dan at Park School, one of the private schools, that had played lacrosse in England. And when she found out that I was doing lacrosse, she called and said, "What can we do at Park School to start it?" Started it at Park. The other three private schools in Buffalo, girls' private schools in Buffalo, then wanted to get involved, and it just kept growing from there. Now, almost all the public schools in Western New York have lacrosse. Rochester, Syracuse, moving right across the state now. But it originally started, I think, right in that little pocket there in Western New York. I moved from Lewiston Porter to Niagara University and taught in the majors program there. And one of my responsibilities there was to develop the women's program as well as the men's program, but to also develop coaching and officiating. So I was involved in that. And officiating, I started the Western New York Officials Association for women's lacrosse. And I had all the majors working, and of course the level of play was very low, so I could assign majors and put them out on the field, and we were okay because they didn't have a lot of experience, but neither did the players, so it worked out fine. But we just grew from there as far as being in Western New York. And I was there from 30 years. And then 2000, when Wes died, I stayed on for a little bit, but then I went back to Maryland and taught for about 4 years, and then came back home when I retired to Western New York. And in 2011, I moved to Port Hope, Ontario, and have been there since. We didn't have it in school, but I played club lacrosse. And the area I lived in, around here at Christmas, the kids will be outside with their new hockey sticks. Down there at Christmas, the kids were outside with their new lacrosse sticks. And so the kids in the neighborhood, the boys would all be playing, and I just happened to pick up a stick now and then and just played catch with that. It was more skill-wise, not game-wise. just handling sticks and playing with the stick work out there. And then I started playing in Baltimore Club. And then when I went to college, they didn't have lacrosse for women there, but I continued playing in Baltimore Club. It happened as a result of my husband's business. We had a company on the reservation in Tuskewe Indian Reservation in New York State, and then we also had a company over here called Canam Lacrosse. In Canada, with the business, we went to national championships, we went to provincial championships, we went to all the local provincial tournaments all around, and people got to know us across the country, both because of the product that we were selling, but they also got to know us personally as far as who we were, where we were from, that type of thing. And in the early 80s, the Canadian Lacrosse Association, I can think Bill Bennett, Marshall Spence, some of those gentlemen, decided that they wanted to get involved in women's field lacrosse at the international level. At that time, there was the International Federation of Women's Field Lacrosse, and they knew that I was connected with it, and they knew I had a background in women's field lacrosse. And so they came to me at one of the CLA meetings and tried to convince me that I should be doing this in Canada. And I tried to convince them that, number one, I'm an American, not a Canadian, and number two, it would be a conflict of interest in the fact that we had a business and I'm selling this product, so how can I turn around and start a program? But ultimately, they convinced me it would not be a conflict of interest, and so that was the beginning of it. But it was supposed to be strictly developmental, and that's, from my perspective, that's what I was doing. I found Jenny Kyle, okay, by accident. Jenny was from Canada. Her daughter played for Paul, and Jenny had a background in lacrosse, and so I convinced her to help. And so the CLA sent us from province to province doing teaching clinics, player clinics, and coaching clinics. And so we visited every province with the exception of New Brunswick, and I don't know why we never went to New Brunswick, but we didn't. Every province, and ran these programs in the different provinces. It was a unique experience. It was great for me. I got to visit Canada from coast to coast. We had some hair-raising experiences. We went to one province, I'm not naming names or people or places, but the gentleman who was supposed to make arrangements for us to be in this province and do teacher clinics forgot to tell his wife that he was having 2 women come and stay at his home. So when we arrived, she was a little surprised and not very happy about the situation. But we did run into a few little things like that. But other than that, we had a really good, and we made contacts in every province. And at the end of that period of time, that was about 2 years, was when I took the first team on tour to the United States from Canada. And that would have been in probably the end of 82, no, it would have been in 83. And on that team, it was specifically designed that we have members from every province across the country. And so we had representation from everywhere except New Brunswick. And the idea on the tour was to take these players down to the United States, play in exhibition games, and motivate and excite them about the prospects that were there so that when they came back to their provinces, they would be willing to do something in their province. And we made this clear from the very beginning. And after that, in every province, we had small pockets started. As time went by, we lost some, but we did, Ontario and British Columbia had already been started, but we had really good groups in Alberta for a while, strong groups in Winnipeg. We even had some good groups in Newfoundland and in Halifax. So. I was not involved directly with the 82 team. We were there, we were in Nottingham, England, so I did see them play. But Paul Paul Gilkinson and Dave Evans from British Columbia were the two coaches, and they brought in Courtney Schellenberger from Philadelphia as the, Courtney wouldn't like this, but as the token woman, because at that time in women's field lacrosse, there would not have been a man on the sideline coaching.
Right.
And so Paul and Dave knew the players. They were all from Ontario and British Columbia. They knew their players, and they were doing the coaching, but Courtney came in as the official head coach of the team for 82. And strong personality, strong coach, and she did a really good job with them over there. She really did. They played exceptionally well, and if you could have seen the expression on the coaches and players on the sideline while they were playing, it was fantastic. So there were four well, Wes was the one that initiated this, and Nations 80 was out in British Columbia, and they asked about a native team. There was I can't remember the gentleman's name that was head of the BCLA at that time, but they asked Wes if he could do something as far as coming up with a native team to participate in Nations 80. And so he got together with Rick Hill, who was from Tuscarora, Orrin Lyons, who was from Onondaga. Those three men sat down and put together the format of how to get representation from the Iroquois as well as the North Shore Indians, because they didn't want to go out there and play without representation from out there, because they also played lacrosse. And at that time, this is Orrin, at that time they needed someone to handle the money. And the safest person was Carol. They didn't want it to disappear, and they wanted it to be used efficiently. And I was the treasurer of the Iroquois Nationals for approximately 17 years. And that was an amazing learning experience, because Orrin Lyons' connections throughout the world are unbelievable. And the amount of money that he could raise with one phone call was unbelievable. And the people he knew were unbelievable. So it was a unique experience. It was not easy handling representations from all the different groups of Iroquois and all the different groups of natives across the country. A lot of them needed more organization and structure than what they were used to. And some of them, on different occasions, I would not acknowledge that I knew them. but as time has gone on, they have done exceptionally well as an organization. And they also have the Iroquois Women's Lacrosse now as well, which has been participating. They started out participating in the Canadian National Championships when we were looking for more teams to come in, because we didn't have a lot of Canadian teams. So they have played quite a few times also. Very much so. And the nucleus of the women's team started on Tuscarora reservation, because Wes and I started it there. And then we drew from the other reservations as well. Denise Waterman in Onondaga helped a lot, but we had some clan mothers who were very vehemently against it because of not only the spiritual game, but the fact that it was not healthy for a girl to be playing sports.
Right.
Okay? I taught health for a number of years, so I would come across with quite a bit of information for them to try and convince them that it would not have negative effects on reproduction, and in some ways it would increase reproduction. So, but they're still not happy with the fact that the women are participating in any sport, much less the sport of lacrosse. The only thing that they constantly, well, the health is one factor. The other factor is that we needed to convince them that this was a social activity and not a spiritual activity.
Yes.
And that was what they were playing. They were not playing the spiritual game. And the men, technically, are not playing the medicine game except when they're requested to do it, which is totally different than the regular sport that they're playing. She was an early player. She played for us.
Oh, she did?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then she progressed on. She was coaching, and then her daughter was an outstanding player, and then Sandy was coaching at one of the state universities down there for a while. So she's been involved for a long time. There were a couple of different ones. United States Lacrosse Association, which no longer exists because they have merged with US Lacrosse, and I think that's the incorrect name too. I think they've changed their nomenclature there. But we did a coaching certification program that started, this would have been way back in it must have been in the 80s. And Sue Lubking was the person that was running it. And there were two people that took that coaching association test or program that summer. And it was Beth Stone from Nichols School in Buffalo and myself. And we were the only two that took it. We passed it. And we were the only two certified coaches in the United States for about 5 years. Now they have an extended coaching certification program and it has been developed. And then I also worked with a summer group where we put together a curriculum for lacrosse to be taught at all levels, and in high school as well as going down into middle school. And that was a summer program that we worked on. I met Jenny Kraus through Paul. Paul had a player on, Paul Gilkinson. Paul had a player on his team whose mother was from England, and I called her one day and said, "Did you play lacrosse in England?" And Jenny said yes, she had. She had played at private school over there. So we got together, and from then on, we worked together a number of years. And she was a very, very dear friend until she passed away just this past year. But we had a lot of fun together. We coached together. She was the manager. She could not handle money, but she could organize things. And she was an asset to the program because her husband was an Air Canada pilot. So we could get really good prices. She could fly for free and she could take me along. They don't do that anymore, I don't think. But at the time, it helped a lot as far as being able to move back and forth across the country. Oh, golly, I think the junior programs and the youth programs, I think, are just fantastic milestones that have happened as we've moved through. We've had the Canadian Senior Championships have always existed. The Junior Championships for a while faded out because they had mainly senior players in the provinces. And as those senior players got older and realized that they couldn't play forever, then they started to work with the younger girls and started to encourage them both in schools and out of schools to continue in their lacrosse development. One of the top people in Ontario that has done this is Barb Boyes. She has run a fantastic youth program for a number of years now. And Ontario had some great leaders. British Columbia had some great leaders. And as a result, that filtering down of the programs has been really good. And the one thing I didn't say is that both Jenny and I were on the Canadian Lacrosse Association Board of Directors. We were vice presidents, which was unheard of. They had never had a vice president that was a woman. So at that time, Abby was the head of sports in Canada, and she was really ecstatic when we got onto the board. She thought all of this would change. But it was a tough time for the CLA during certain areas there, and yes. It worked out well. So. Oh, I used to always recruit friends from down the States, come up and visit us, and then bring them across the border. So they would come up for a week on the reservation, and then we would stop over in different places in Canada. Jackie Pitts came up and would do coaching clinics and teaching clinics. I got several of the college coaches to come, because the schools were closed during the summer, to come up and spend the summer in Calgary working with the girls out there. They didn't get paid, but room and board was provided, and by having these US coaches come in and spend time, it made a big difference. I pulled a picture before I came of Roseanne Neff. I have no idea where she is now, but she was at Lockhaven College, and she helped me in Quebec. I did a lot in Quebec first. They were much more open. Pierre was much more open to me coming down and doing things than some of the other provinces were. And he was also very gung-ho at getting Quebec started in girls lacrosse. And she went down there. Neither one of us spoke French, which was interesting, but you can coach and teach without speaking the language. They knew when I liked what they did, and they knew what I didn't like. But a lot of the coaches would come up, and just having them there was motivation for the new players that were coming in, because they could see that all these coaches were in the country and were interested in helping them develop. And then from there on, I mean, at national championships, we always had US coaches up recruiting. I can remember one time in Calgary, there were at least 6 US coaches that were there on the sidelines. And for that, yeah, for Canada, that was fantastic. This, yeah, would have been in the 80s. Yeah. We were in Philadelphia. We were in Ursinus College. Libby Williams was the head coach. Libby was an interesting lady, and she was a very demanding person. Jenny and I were the 2 gophers for that team, and it was a really good experience. I enjoyed that a lot, and I look at myself more as a teacher and a developer than I do as a coach. I've coached everything all along the way, but still I think my philosophy is more in development and in learning and growing and that part of the sport than in just the idea of coaching. And so having Libby as head coach allowed us to do a lot more with the players, because when you had a team that didn't get together that often because of distance, you had to do a lot as far as building relationships between the different players. And I would say that Jenny and I spent a lot of time trying to make sure those relationships grew and that our team came together as a unit when they were playing. Yes. But we had some really good players, and one young lady just was an outstanding new girl from Quebec that just did a fantastic job and was recognized by the press and everything. Louise St. Louis, I can't remember her first name, sorry. Yep. And she walked in as a newcomer and just was fantastic. But they all worked hard and did a really good job. Well, I can honestly say it wasn't for money. I mean, our business was solvent, and you know, we existed for the business he set up existed for 30 years. We always made money. We always employed people on the reservation. I would say that both of us felt exactly the same about lacrosse. It was the #1 thing in our heart. We really enjoyed the game. We really loved what it did for the people that played the game. We just all thought it was very, very special to be with those that were playing. So it definitely was for the love of the game and the love of the player and not for the money, because my nephew once said to his uncle, if you didn't have Carol, you'd give everything away. which to a certain extent he would, because there was never anybody that walked into the shop. If they needed something, they left with it. It didn't matter whether they had the money to pay for it or not. They had it. I think they were very good to the women's program. We didn't get a lot of money, but we did get support. But I don't think very few people got a lot of money, because I don't think it was there to get. And that was one thing that I feel that was difficult for starting the teams because they had to raise the money in order to travel to all these things. And I had one player on tour one time that was from Alberta. She sold her horse in order to go on tour. And I'm thinking, you know,
Wow.
I know the dedication that was there was phenomenal. And
Wow.
you know, they all worked really hard in order to put the money in order to go on tour to England. We went to England, we went to Scotland, we went to Wales. I took a group from Quebec to Paris one time, and we did exhibition games over there. Scotland came and joined us to do exhibition games there. So there was a lot of work that the girls actually did themselves in order to play. Number one, it's a fantastic game as far as physical ability. And if you look at the players today versus when I played, if you look at the players today, they're much more intense, much more, and this is true for all athletes, much more physically developed, much more aggressive. I'm not sure I like that sometimes, but they are developing into superior athletes. And I think this is an excellent thing for anyone to do as far as the physical abilities that they can develop themselves. I think the opportunities that exist for women and men in lacrosse is growing weekly with the number of schools that are picking up the sport. I think through education, being able to have an education provided for them because of their ability in the sport is fantastic. Internationally, it's growing. Quite a few players that I know are now working in England or working in Australia for the sports councils in these countries to help promote lacrosse and work in lacrosse. And so it's also providing job opportunities for when they're finished school and ready to go out into the real world and work for a living. There's just multiple avenues that are opening up for everyone in sport.